dignitaries on the stage, fellow arbitration enthusiasts, friends and colleagues. On behalf of PSL advocates and solicitors, I am pleased to welcome you all to today's breakfast event, Arbitration Crosstalk, in collaboration with Arbitral Women as part of the MCIA's India ADR Week 2023. This event promises an engaging, free-flowing conversation among distinguished arbitrators and arbitration councils and aims to capture insights from the inspiring journeys. A word and a shout out for our collaborators. Arbitral Women is an international non-governmental organization founded in 1993, bringing together women international dispute resolution practitioners and works to continuously advance the interest of women in dispute resolution. It has close to 1,000 members from jurisdictions across the world, spanning across 40 jurisdictions across the world. As a new age law firm espousing the cause of gender diversity and inclusivity in the legal profession, we are delighted to host this event in collaboration with Arbitral Women. Today, we have with us an illustrious panel of speakers comprising of highly accomplished and distinguished women in arbitration practice. Please allow me to introduce them. First, we have Honorable Ms. Justice Gita Mittal. Justice Mittal served as the first woman Chief Justice of the Jammu and Kashmir High Court, and prior to that, she acted as the acting Chief Justice of the High Court of Delhi. She regularly sits as arbitrator in high-stakes domestic and international arbitration. She is an inspirational figure for women in the legal profession. We also have with us today Ms. Rebecca James. Rebecca is a partner at Linklater, Singapore, in the international arbitration practice. She is widely recognized as an international arbitration specialist with a strong focus in the Asia-Pacific and the Middle East region. She has over 13 years of experience practicing in Singapore, England, and Australia. She also has expertise in investment arbitrations and public international law matters. Next, we have Ms. Yuet Min Fu. Yuet is the Director, Dispute Resolution Practice at Drew & Napier, Singapore. She regularly appears before the Singapore courts as a lead counsel and also in complex SIAC and ICC arbitrations. She has also served as an arbitrator in numerous SIAC, ICC, and ad hoc international arbitrations. She has particular interest in dealing with multilingual proceedings. Last but certainly not the least, we have Ms. Manini Brar. Manini is the head of Arbit Chambers and specializes in commercial arbitration and investment arbitrations. She is the member of the steering committee of the Young Arbitral Women Practitioners Group. She also sits on the advisory board of the Indian Women in International Arbitration Group. She often dons the hat of an arbitrator in domestic and international arbitrations and has been appointed as an arbitrator in numerous matters by the High Court of Delhi. Today's panel discussion would be moderated by our very own Ms. Jayashree Parihar. Jayashree is a counsel at PSL Advocates and Solicitors, and she is also our in-house fitness coach and a very avid mountaineer. I leave the floor open for discussion and hand it over to Jayashree.
Thank you so much, Savigya. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the panelists for accepting our invitation and joining us today. When I sit on this stage, I actually see more men than women attending this event, and I'm ecstatic to see the turnout, at least for an 8 a.m. event, which I know is very, very tough for a lot of people to get to. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. The format of today's session would be a question and answer session where I'll be posing certain questions to the panelists, and they would be responding to these questions which we've devised. So my first question, and I'm quickly moving on to the questions now. My first question is directed to everyone, and I'll start with Rebecca first. What are the skills required to be a successful arbitrator? And from you, I would request a counsel's perspective on this.
Of course, thanks so much, Jayashree. And everyone has different perspectives on this, but from my perspective, there are a few key attributes that you always need. The first is technical competence, and that almost sounds so obvious it goes without saying, but you can have a wide range of laws in play in these sorts of disputes, and making sure you have actually picked somebody that has relevant knowledge and expertise is really key. The second point is procedural rigor, and this is a difficult art to get right sometimes, because if you have, in my experience, an arbitrator that is not prepared to take control of a process, you can really end up in the downward spiral of time and cost in arbitration that so many users are unhappy with. So making sure you have somebody who's really prepared to take the reins is quite important. And the final one, which is close to my heart, and I think everybody here, is actually diversity. And, you know, I think you sometimes see there are too many of the same people being reappointed again and again, and it's really incumbent on all of us to get a broader mix of people sitting, and that's because it is both the right thing to do, but also because it leads to better results and better quality. And frankly, a lot of new people coming through often have better availability, and this is a point we were discussing at coffee beforehand, actually. So it tends to lead to better results for clients when you do have younger, hungrier people that are appointed sometimes.
Manini, would you like to add something to that?
Thank you, Jayashree. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and for having me here. One of the skills is certainly consistency. That is not to upset what has already been said. So I wholly concur with what Rebecca has already said. But I would just add from an arbitrator's perspective that what I have seen is when you're starting out, you have to devote enough time and attention to your arbitrations, which is something as practicing counsel we sometimes lose sight of. It might be a small matter and it might be low dispute, but it's important that at every step of the procedure, you're very alive to the needs of the parties and the needs of the dispute. And I think the smaller the matter, usually it is more procedurally complex, because either one or both of the counsel are not frequent as arbitration practitioners, or there are procedural issues that come up along the way, some of which are very novel because parties will try everything in a small dispute. So I think that is something that one has to be alive to. You have to be thorough and not think of it as a small dispute. And I think the other thing is certainly visibility. That is a skill that you need. You know, you need to be able to say that this is something that you want to do, and to convince yourself that you know, you're adequate to the task. Otherwise, even when you are sitting in hearings, it's very easy for the counsel also to sense the sort of uncertainty on the side of the arbitrator. So if you don't have the conviction that you're going to be able to conduct this proceeding and that you're going to be in this position of authority, then it's very difficult to carry through an entire arbitration. So that's what I would say.
Thanks, Manini. Justice Mittal, would you like to add something to this?
Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal, Assalamu Alaikum, Salam. A very good day to everybody. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this wonderful panel. We were talking of inclusivity, you know, the opening words did say that, but I see there's not a single man with us, you know, on this panel. It would have been nice to be joined by one or two men here. But thank you to everybody, not only the organizers, but to everybody who's been joined here at 8 a.m. in the morning. You see, everybody on this panel has more experience than I do in arbitration. But I'm trying to learn and hoping to learn fast. And I have found from my experience that the procedure of arbitration varies very, very clearly and absolutely from court proceedings. The requirement of legal knowledge, as Rebecca also said, is very imperative. You know, you may need domain knowledge of the subject, and it is very essential for arbitrators to be ready to be prepared with the matter all the time. Your analytical and thinking skills have to be honed and fine-tuned always. Your communication skills are required, as has been pointed out by Manini also. Writing and communication skills have to be very crisp, efficient, and you have to have an ability to be able to relate to the parties, unlike in normal in ordinary court jurisdictions, then I have also found that you need to be emotionally and culturally context, even not only with the subject matter of the dispute, but also with the parties. You need to have, impartiality which is an essential part of the requirement of an arbitrator, and an ability to listen. Very, very important. In court you have a captive audience and judges are able to get there, say what they want to. But in arbitration, it is very important to have the ability to listen to both sides and an ability to write clearly in language which is easily understandable by the parties. There's confidentiality attached to the awards, but your language should be clear and you should have the skill to be able to write and deal with issues clearly and with clarity, so that they're understandable and finality is achieved to what is written in the award.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Anything you want to add to this, Youthman? Okay, Youthman can be addressed as Youthman or YM, however you prefer while asking questions.
Just a very quick one. I was going to say willingness to listen, but Judge, you have mentioned that. And I would just add very good organizational skills.
Yes.
To organize parties in the event that they can't organize themselves. I will just add that and we can.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. My next question is a counsel perspective question specifically addressed to Rebecca. From a counsel's perspective, on which all parameters do you evaluate prospective arbitrators before nominating them as arbitrators in your matters?
I think, to be honest, my answer to this question overlaps a lot with the last one, actually. So I think all of the points we've talked about, technical competence, procedural rigor, relevant experience, cultural sensitivity and context, which is key, are all really important. The one point I would probably add is the client overlay, actually, to all of this. So it will depend a bit on the matter, but ultimately we will always need to put forward recommendations, but act on instructions. So some clients might have a preference for a certain type of arbitrator, and that will always be a really important part of the ultimate nomination process from my perspective.
Just a follow-up to that, would you also look at panel dynamics if you are just nominating a party's nomination of an arbitrator? Would you also keep in mind the other nominated people in the panel?
Absolutely, and I think it's a really insightful question, and that's absolutely key, because what you really want is, when you're putting forward your party-nominated arbitrator, for that person not just to be able to do a good job individually, but to gel well with the other tribunal members and to be both influential and not, to be honest, so difficult to get along with that the other arbitrators would love to find a way to disagree with them. So finding that personality can be difficult, but we always give very careful thought to overall panel dynamics in the early stages.
Thank you. Thanks, Rebecca. Now, next question is quite exciting, actually. Ma'am, this is for you. After arbitrating on numerous matters, what do you see as the measure of success of an arbitrator? Is it the number of reappointments or the fact that the award is not set aside?
Having been a judge for almost 20 years, I saw there used to be a competition, we used to measure a judge's worth in several similar factors, like disposals, how many number of cases decided, and it was all to do with numbers. So far as measuring the success of an arbitrator is concerned, I don't think numbers matter at all. It has to be the perception that you're able to create in the mind of counsel and the parties, the worth of your work, the value of even your integrity, the reputation that you're able to build as an arbitrator who listens, as an arbitrator who delivers, as an arbitrator who is efficient. I am an arbitrator of very recent vintage, I limited office only in December 2020. So as of now, I don't even have 3 years experience. But my sense, and this is what I've been able to discern, and this is how I would like to work, is to be treated with respect amongst my peers, amongst counsels, amongst parties, who have appeared before me. What happens to my award should not matter. There is always two sides to a coin. I always said justice is not defined. The party who succeeds in a case or gets a judgment in their favor says justice is done. The other side will invariably say injustice has been done. And there are always ways of interpreting law, interpreting facts. So what happens to your word shouldn't matter, but so long as you have been efficient, honest, and been able to enforce the qualities of fairness, transparency, and impartiality.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think this really ties well with the visibility point which Manini was also speaking of earlier. My next question is to Manini. What barriers or obstacles do new arbitrators face when seeking a first appointment? And if you could go ahead and answer that and follow it up with an answer from Rebecca. Thank you.
Can you hear me? So I think for me, my experience, I can only talk of my experience and a little bit about my experience at the ICC, where I was a deputy counsel and I was very much in the throes of the job of appointing arbitrators on a daily basis. And even now, as a senior legal consultant with the Ministry of Commerce, we do come up with lists of potential arbitrators and discuss arbitrators for the investor-state disputes and like things. So just from the perspective that I have as a young arbitrator and the appointments that I consider now, I think the one most important thing is a skill that unfortunately it's a little difficult, I think, for women to develop, is networking. For me, that is top of the line because, it's a bit like out of sight, out of mind. And there are so many good, capable advocates and lawyers that unless you know that somebody is interested in this line of work and has projected themselves as so, it's very difficult for that person to readily come to your mind. So I would definitely say that's number one. And the other thing that I have picked up is over the course of my arbitrations, what I have learned is that you need to start sort of thinking as an arbitrator as opposed to a counsel. And that's not an easy transition for everybody to make because as counsel, we are sometimes very, I want to say, alternatively argumentative. We'll say, okay, there's this option and then there's this option, and it's also bad in law because there's no jurisdiction, and there are 5 different arguments, and really what you need to do as an arbitrator is to be able to distill all that information and come up with what is the most appropriate decision in a particular case, and so that requires a certain amount of legal training, so I would say take the tribunal secretary program of any good institution. The MCIA has one as well. The HKIAC has one. There are any number of institutions. Or sit a clerk with an arbitrator, so that you know that this is something, how it's supposed to be approached, what is the procedure, what is procedural order 1, how do you deal with the case management conference. Otherwise, it's very difficult for you to, when you are first struck with your first appointment, to know exactly how to conduct yourself and how to think about the dispute. So I would say these 2 things, networking and also a certain amount of transition in your thinking, which only comes from experience. Yeah.
Thanks, Manini. Rebecca, anything you would want to add to this?
Yeah, thanks so much. I would add two points. One, I guess with my hat on as what I see on the appointing side as counsel, and the other with my hat on as trying to get an appointment and failing so far, actually. So on the first point, it is a source of personal frustration for me sometimes that clients are quite understandably but conservative in the appointments that they would like to make. So when you might have identified somebody that you think will be fantastic, but they don't have many credentials under their belt as arbitrator yet, or sometimes even none, you might recommend the name, and the client might be the most wonderful human being who will be, in principle, very keen on broadening the pool of people. But then when you sort of really drill down into it and say, well, fantastic, how about on this case? Oh, I mean, maybe not on this case, and as long as you can, have you seen them in action? Can you guarantee that they will perform as well as this person that has 5 to 10 years experience? And you can very quickly get to a place where, you just cannot get the person appointed even when you want to, actually, because of that concern with the high stakes disputes we deal with, that it's just not the right time for them to have their moment. So that is one challenge, I think, and one of the best ways of meeting that challenge is to do sort of the tribunal secretary training, to take the lower stakes appointments when you can, to build up those credentials. But yeah, I guess my second point, and just from the perspective of having been approached by various institutions to offer me appointments a few times, one challenge you can really face when you're trying to do both counsel and arbitrator work is law firm conflicts. And I can see some nods at the other end of the table. I mean, law firm conflicts. So it's just that is realistically a barrier, and a lot of people I've talked to have in the same position have said that, it's maybe a 3 in 10 success rate, 2 in 10 success rate. So the advice I've received is just you need to be patient and not give up, and hopefully it will come good at some point.
Thank you. Thanks, Rebecca. In fact, that's how declarations of being independent or unbiased plays such an important role in arbitration. My next question is for Yuet. How did you get your first appointment? And if you could just share some anecdotes with us in relation to the same.
Yeah, I got my first appointment by elimination. By having a different nationality from my peers, by having a certain language ability that was required for the case, and I think most importantly, a mentor who was watching out for me. When he was asked by SIAC to give a name, he ran through all the people he knew, and he thought, okay, I think there's only one person. Because in that case, they couldn't appoint a Singaporean. So I practiced in Singapore. But my nationality is Malaysian. So they couldn't engage, they couldn't appoint a Singaporean because one of the parties was Singaporean. The other party was Chinese. They needed somebody who could speak, who could read and write and speak Mandarin. So I could do that. It was a very small case in the large context of things. But I think as a very young person, I was very young at that time. Obviously, there's a willingness to take on anything that comes your way. It was very new to me to take on a position as an arbitrator. I've seen my mentor doing it, and so I thought, okay, it can't be that bad. I have sort of like helped him in some things, so I think should be able to do that. So that's how I got my first appointment, and I think in a way, once you get your name known to the institution. And if they see your award and it's not bad, usually you sort of remain in the list, and they may appoint you again later on. But I completely concur with what Rebecca was saying. Somebody asked me in another talk similar to this, how do you manage your counsel work with your arbitrator appointments? Because usually counsel work you don't get to control the timeline. So does that mean that when you do arbitrator work, you don't have enough time to do that? I always say that the conflict system will take care of it, because the percentage success is very low. You get asked 10 times, you are lucky if you can get 2 that are cleared of conflicts, especially if you work in a full service law firm. More often than not, you'll be conflicted out. And also because the institutions are very careful, from my experience, they're very careful in basically listing out every single possible name that's involved in the case, even if they were just the general manager who was involved in something, the name is there. And you have to clear conflicts for 15 people. So it's almost impossible. But I think that's one of the things that would help to get your first appointment. Just having something, I suppose, that is a bit different from the people you are who are within that selection pool. I think that will be key, I think, in getting your first appointment.
Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am, of course.
No, it's rather mostly a question to Rebecca and to Yuet. Don't you find gendered appointments? Gender is an issue in the appointments? I think there's a very low glass ceiling, for where women are concerned, and this is all over, everywhere, but it's a struggle to get appointments also because of your gender.
Yes and no. So yes, insofar as I think to get party nominations, is very difficult. Party nomination is very difficult. And it's not because other lawyers are not willing to put up your name, is what Rebecca has said. When the client starts asking certain questions, many traditional clients have certain views on what kind of factors, what kind of attributes make for a good arbitrator. And I think sometimes if in a panel of 3, they may think that the female may not be as assertive in putting forward the case of the nominator, of the party that nominated them. So I think party nominations are extremely difficult. But I think in Singapore, for example, I think the institutions do a great job at promoting their diversity. So they make a huge effort in always trying to find names that are out of the ordinary. I think they try very hard to do that. So I think party nominations truly difficult even until now, I feel. Even when I try to give names to the clients, often, they will end up in the final selection, but they won't be selected.
Rebecca, would you like to add something to it?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I've lost count of the number of times I've heard comments from clients that have a degree of subconscious bias. You'll have a very experienced woman. Are you sure she's assertive enough? Yes, she's assertive enough, and you would not have said the same thing about a male with equivalent experience. So that's a challenge. But I do think, I just add one uplifting note there. I'm seeing a real change come through from a lot of corporate clients with their own focus on diversity, and increasingly they have their own commitments to meet where they need to put forward a certain percentage of female candidates and consider broader diversity as well. So I think the direction of travel is positive, even though we're starting from quite a low base on party nominations.
Thanks, Rebecca. In fact, just to add on, that's why Arbitral Women as an organization, or equal representation in arbitration, the pledge, plays such an important role in promoting diversity in arbitration. And these organizations, I think everyone should just go online and check out what Arbitral Women stands for, or ERA pledge, which is the equal representation in arbitration, stand for, and just go through their objective and understand exactly what is the need of the hour and where we are working and why we are having this panel discussion today. Thank you. My next question is to Manini. Given your experience with various arbitral institutions and how you've worked with them and also worked as an arbitrator through them, are there any institutions which are open to new and young arbitrators? And are there any additional or different consideration which arbitral institutions have while appointing a new arbitrator? And how can young arbitrators be impaneled as arbitrators with such institutions?
Thank you, Jayashree, for that question. And just a minor correction, I have not yet received an institutional appointment. And so just to carry on from the discussion that just happened before this, real heartfelt hat tip to the Delhi High Court, and not because ma'am is sitting here, because I have received a plethora of appointments, over 15 appointments from the Delhi High Court. And when you think about institutions promoting gender diversity, I know that the High Court in Bombay is also actively appointing younger lawyers and women as arbitrators and amicus curiae in various matters, and so is the Delhi High Court, really promoting the younger bar. So in India, one of the things that you can do is just pursue your practice with a certain amount of rigor and faith in the appropriate forum, and hope that something will work out. So that's number one. But on your specific question, I do think that the biggest challenge for me as to get my first appointment was certainly my visibility. And now I'm talking about not visibility within a particular dispute, but to be out there and to be noticed as someone who was interested in this kind of work. And I think that forums such as whether it's Arbitral Women, whether it's IWIA, whether it is a lot of the institutions who have now taken up diversity very seriously, are a really good place to start, because they are specific and they create smaller communities. See, you can be a part of a much bigger community. You can be a part of like a young members group in an institution, but that's a much bigger community, and therefore visibility in that community is slightly more difficult to get. But if you focus on, smaller groups which are more specific to your areas of practice, and there are many of those, I do think that that is a very good way of sort of starting out. And just to share an anecdote, when I was with the ICC in about 2017, we sat down one day with this determination where we said, okay, we're going to list down the number of women arbitrators that we know, because we're not appointing enough of them at the time. And we came out with about 8 names after about an hour of sitting together and brainstorming. And it just made us wonder, because it's not like there are not enough competent advocates out there. It's just that one doesn't know of them. Partly it was a lot of course correction for us, but it just goes to show that you have to be in the mind of the institution. And in addition to these forums, in addition to the networking that you do, one more thing that you can certainly do is get your qualifications, because there are certain qualifications that equip you to be an arbitrator. So whether it's the tribunal's training program or the FCIR, which is a great qualification to have, even if you're an independent advocate, become a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. It's a fairly straightforward process. And a quick one, and that will put you in the league of people who are open to appointments. So I think that also helps a lot.
Thanks, Manini. Next question is addressed to everyone, but I will start with Justice Mittal on this one. Why is the case management conference so important, especially from the point of view of time and cost effectiveness?
So first and foremost, it enables you to identify the issues involved in the party, and it enables you to get to know the counsels as well as the parties very quickly. It streamlines the formalities like discovery of documents, interrogatories, etc. Enables you to shorten the procedure. It also, most importantly, which I am very strong on, I believe very strongly in, is it enables settlement discussions, It enables you to develop the bridge between the parties to commence and explore the possibility of resolving a dispute. It leads to certainly a more efficient and a very productive arbitration process. You're able to also manage that deadlines and timelines that you have fixed are met very strictly, and also enables monitoring and addressing any concerns of the parties as the arbitration progresses, curtailing any pitfalls or any creases that may come in the process.
Thank you so much. Ma'am, Yuet, would you like to add something to this?
Maybe from the council perspective? From the council perspective, I think I take that first procedure, case management hearing, to be a place where you sort of try to gauge what works for the arbitrator or the panel of arbitrators. You try to figure out what's the dynamic amongst them and what would work. Because that's your first time seeing, even if you know them individually, it's likely the first time you see them together and how they discuss and who takes the lead and, who gets to influence the presiding and things like that. So other than the fact that you need to pay a lot of attention to the actual procedure that's going to determine how your case is run, because I think oftentimes, and now procedural orders are getting very long, oftentimes you miss out certain details that would then give you problems later on. So it's actually quite important to read through that and then be able to discuss that and sort it out. But I think mainly for me, I take that as an opportunity to assess and gauge how the arbitrators are going to work together, so that when you later on present your case, you sort of make sure that you cover all grounds, because everybody will be focused on different things. Each of the arbitrators will be focused on different things, and you need to be able to address each of those concerns to make sure that you leave no stone unturned.
Thanks, Yuet. Anything you want to add, Rebecca or Manini, to this?
Just briefly, I completely agree with that. I think the CMC is a really important opportunity to assess, engage tribunal dynamics, but the extra point I would add is that it's also your first opportunity to create an impression with the tribunal, and I think it's important at the earliest possible stage to try to set yourself up as the credible voice, the adult in the room, the person that will be reasonable, that they can trust as the case moves forward. So I think that can end up being linked to the substance, because it means, in my view, that you shouldn't take every stupid procedural point unless you really think it's important.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yes, sure.
Can I just add to that? From the arbitrator's perspective also, it is the occasion to gauge the parties. so there's a lot of gauging going along in the CMC, because you're also trying to understand, it's your first impression of the case. You've basically just probably read the request for arbitration or the notice for arbitration, and you're trying to see where the parties are and how much they will argue on the procedure. And typically what happens is if one side, for example, the respondent, is asking for an unreasonable amount of time, for example, to file the statement of defense, as an arbitrator, I am understanding that there is some delay that is being pushed on one side. And it's just something that stays, with the arbitrator. So I think it's important from the arbitrator's perspective also to sort of understand what the dispute is, who the parties are, what is the particular procedure that this particular case requires, which is very different in different cases. You have a jurisdictional objection. Are you going to have two timetables, one for bifurcation and another for no bifurcation? Are there any disclosures that have been left out? Where are you with the case? I think that's important.
Thanks, Manini. My next question is for youth men. I think everyone would want to know the answer to this question. Are there any jurisdictions where you think appointments are easier, and if so, why?
It's my opportunity to sell Singapore. No. No, I think in most jurisdictions where international arbitration is a main product, where it's important, I think you would find it easier to get appointments. I was actually telling Jayashree, I said, wow, this question is very difficult, but I'm happy to just say something so that we can get the conversation going. Because I think in places where they are trying to promote themselves as arbitration hubs, that's the place where there will be an effort made to renew the arbitration circle and to bring in more people into the circle, because the more invested people are, the more that place will grow as a hub. So I don't know, there are many concerns, I suppose, I'm told that in India it's very difficult to break in because parties are used to nominating particular arbitrators from a very select small group, and that makes it difficult for new people who are trying to get new appointments, to break into that circle. But I find that a lot of the effort is really from the institutions and from people who are selecting. As Manini mentioned just now, just people actually spending time to sit down and think about who you actually have, and that will then spur certain action later on and help the circle grow. So I think in most of the main hubs for arbitration, those comparatively would be the places where I think it may be relatively easier to get appointments. I'm not sure whether Rebecca or Manini has any views on that.
I don't have anything to add to that, actually. I agree.
Thank you so much, Youthman. My next question is for Justice Mittal, and I think all of us have witnessed this. How do you deal with parties adopting dilatory tactics or guerrilla tactics in arbitration?
Many years of experience in dealing with that. We have proverbially, Indian courts are, it's proverbially said about delays in courts. Two reasons why parties indulge in this. One is to delay adjudication, and the second purpose, more important, is to tire the other side out. Go on taking adjournment so that costs go up and the party finally says enough is enough. But the bottom line and how to deal with that is to be prepared. To know that, to expect that such things may happen, and to evaluate and understand parties' movements in the case, why a particular application is filed, why a particular adjournment is taken, strategic interruptions by a lawyer, just when the other side is about to, make a point and succeed with you, So you have to be able to anticipate and deal with that. The answer to that has to be your being on top of the case. You have to be fully aware of not only the procedural aspects, but the material aspects, the substantive aspects of the case, and deal with such tactics firmly. But you have to be even-handed in when you deal with that. You can't be, hard on one and soft on one party. You have to make sure that there is no impression created of being exceptionally hard on one side, and you're being one-sided in the view that you are taking. And apart from that, consistency is very important. Please use the sanctions permitted by law, costs, striking out pleadings, even closing a case wherever required. But be sure that you have been fair and open, and you have to be very proactive. You can call out a party's, strategy and discuss the strategy with them, and let them know what you think about the tactics being employed, and call for an objective response from the other side as well. And this is the way. Another thing that I found very effective in courts, which I do in arbitration as well, is when a request for adjournment is made, you don't lose your temper. You smile and you grant the adjournment, but you give a short date. In court, I was able to say, all right, come tomorrow, come tomorrow, come tomorrow. How many tomorrows would the party go on asking adjournments for, and they would get tired? It's more difficult as an arbitrator managing your diary, because you have other commitments as well. But that's the only way of stemming the onslaught of guerrilla tactics.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would now, a very related question I would ask Rebecca now. How do you deal with defaulting respondent? And especially from a counsel's perspective, is there any tactic would you adopt to deal with such situations?
Yeah, it's an interesting one and a really tricky one. And actually, I had an experience earlier this year dealing with this. But look, I think there are 2 points. The first is what you do before you end up with a defaulting party to make sure that if it happens, you're in a good position. This is where you need to appoint people like Justice Mittal to deal with the situation appropriately and not have sort of due process paranoia. I think, look, as and when it does happen, sometimes you need to, just encourage the tribunal to use the powers they have in their inherent jurisdiction, in the rules, because actually most sets of rules will have express powers these days. And actually, a defaulting respondent can't prevent an enforceable award from being rendered. What's really critical is if they stop participating, that you move forward and give them every opportunity to engage. The fact that they might stop responding to emails does not mean you should not copy them to every email, and smart tribunals will still give them the opportunity to make submissions and set deadlines for those that will be, passed time and time again. But that basically means that you're future-proofing the award that you will get if the respondent stops participating, because, if they want to pursue a spurious challenge, they probably still will, but the odds of them succeeding on the basis of not being heard or procedural unfairness are, in my experience, very low in that situation.
Thanks, Rebecca. Youthman, would you like to add something to this?
Actually, I've had many cases where we had defaulting respondents or non-appearing respondents. And I think if any of you are going to get your first appointment, there's a high chance that in many of the first few cases, which are likely like smaller cases, you will have a respondent who doesn't appear. So I think, most tribunals, and I think even if the tribunal doesn't suggest it, as the other side's counsel, you would suggest it, is as Rebecca said, you make sure that they are given opportunities, you make sure that everything is they're copied on all the emails. What we do as an additional step is we would send hard copies. We will courier, no matter where they are, we will send hard copies at every juncture. So, after every important juncture, and if it is procedural matters, then after every few steps have been taken, you will send the entire thing from beginning to that point to the respondent's office in hard copy, get a delivery receipt from the courier company. We do all of that. Or if you have a local lawyer in that jurisdiction, then send that lawyer's staff to that office and get acknowledgements or receipt. That would help to protect the award later on. And same thing, you try to encourage them to appear. But I had a case where we had a concurrent court proceedings as well as arbitration proceedings. So some disputes were in court and some disputes were in arbitration. And for some reason, they appeared for the court. I suppose for obvious reasons, they appeared in the court proceedings, but never appeared in the arbitration. So I think it's also bringing that fact to the attention of the tribunal to show them that obviously they know that there are arbitration proceedings going on. They have appeared in the court proceedings, but they just refuse to appear in the arbitration. But we get delivery receipts for everything that has been sent to them, all the way until the very end. And then to make sure all those attempts and effort is listed out in the award. So there's like an annex to the award that says each time things have been delivered to them, what was delivered to them, and whether you got an acknowledgement of receipts. So I think that's what we do for defaulting respondents.
Thanks, Yuetmin. In fact, that's a very, very important point which we were even discussing earlier, that record keeping, especially from a service point of view, is very, very important and crucial in the event there is a defaulting respondent. My next question is addressed to everyone, and this is with respect to what we've been facing of late, that is virtual hearings. What is your experience been with virtual hearings? And I'll start with Justice Mittal on this one.
I think it's the best thing which has happened. It saves so much in terms of time and costs, not only to the arbitrator, but to the parties, counsels as well. And the navigation through terrible traffic in the city of Delhi, and it must be the same in other parts of the world and other parts of the country, definitely. So the biggest thing that you are saved is, not apart from the costs, is the time and the exhaustion from navigating heavy traffic. But also, having said that, I find that the efficiency in the proceedings is tremendous. A lot of time that would be wasted in manipulating files and, the administration of running an arbitration proceedings is prevented from the fact that you are on a screen and things move much faster, Invariably, the lawyers who are appearing before you have a smart junior who is quickly able to screen share documents, whereas if you were in the room, you would be plodding through large numbers of files, etc., virtual files as well as hard copies. So the biggest advantage of virtual hearings has been the efficiency which has been imparted to the proceedings. These days we have a lot of it's used regularly in Singapore and in Australia and other parts of the world. But transcription is a recent phenomena. And I am using a transcription firm in my proceedings, which is based in Chennai. So it's incredible, how you are able to be interstate across the country and get transcription of your proceedings sitting in Delhi as you go along through the proceedings. The recording of evidence has become a wonderful experience because of this transcription exercise. And one more very important factor is the fact that parties don't have to travel. Any number of people can join you from whichever part of the world there are, any time of the day. You don't have to worry too much about time differences. Proceedings can be recorded and are replayed. And so virtual hearings are a big boon. I think they have added a lot of value to court hearings, but certainly to arbitration proceedings where you choose the time and place of your arbitration. And irrespective of what has been nominated and designated as a venue or the site of arbitration, arbitrators are not having to move out of the comfort zone of their offices and their homes to conduct the arbitration proceedings. So it's a very, very efficient way of conducting arbitration.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Rebecca, would you like to add something to this? And then I'll move to Manini and Yuetmin.
Sure. Just very briefly, my experience of virtual hearings has, like Justice Mittal's, been very positive, actually, and I love the fact that it's so rare that you need to travel internationally for procedural hearings. Hopefully that will never happen again, but actually even merits hearings, you can cross-examine witnesses surprisingly effectively with the technology as it is now, and there are mechanisms you can put in place to, at least in a post-COVID era, check that things are being done properly, that they don't have notes, you can have someone supervise. So there are ways to ensure the propriety of the process. The final point I would just add is an additional benefit of not flying so much is with my hat on as on the steering committee for the campaign for greener arbitrations. I think historically arbitration's footprint on the environment has been absolutely huge and disproportionate, and this shift to virtual hearings and just eliminating those flights globally has a really positive and huge impact on the overall impact sustainably of our practice.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Manini?
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, I really have nothing to add except that that I've seen that somehow Indian parties are uncomfortable with the idea of the evidentiary hearing happening online. So they want it to be a physical hearing, and that is something that I think we just have to come around, because now there are so many processes. I mean, the DIAC has an excellent virtual hearing protocol that can be borrowed from, and so many market practices have developed around virtual cross-examinations, where you can have a representative of the counsel cross-examining be in the presence of the person who's being cross-examined. And so I think that the key to overcoming this last sort of hill of physical cross-examination is to put in place a good virtual protocol, which gives the parties enough confidence that nothing will go amiss. And another thing that I've really benefited from, at least as an arbitrator just learning the throes of being an arbitrator, is that you can record every hearing. And I do that. Whatever's happening virtually, it's a bulky record, but it's all there. So that even if the parties tomorrow say, oh, well, you didn't listen to this and you didn't do this, it's all there for the court to see. So I think that also provides a certain amount of comfort to the parties that, okay, this is being recorded and there's nothing that's going amiss here.
Thanks, Manini. Yuet, would you like to add something?
Yeah, so I like virtual hearings. I mean, there's a lot of convenience attached to it. But I'm very traditional in the sense that there's a beauty to physical hearings.
Yeah, maybe then you can speak about the disadvantages of virtual hearings.
So I like the fact that in a physical hearing, you get to see everything that's going around, because in a virtual hearing, usually only the people who are speaking have their cameras on. You don't actually see what other people are doing. But in the physical hearing, I always have in the counsel team, we always have somebody who is tasked to make sure you watch what everybody else is doing in the room, because it gives you a good indication. Sometimes you are just watching the tribunal members as well, just being able to know when they are taking notes and what they are writing on gives you good indication of what is important to them. Especially if you are in the same jurisdiction, then I would much prefer in the same jurisdiction, because I completely agree with the reducing our carbon footprint. But if you're in the same jurisdiction, I would prefer physical hearings. There's just, I suppose, in a way more that you can gauge and see. And also, I think for the lawyers involved, because in Singapore now, in the courts, most things are done virtually until the actual trial. So the trial is usually in person, but most other hearings are done virtually. And I get a complaint from the younger lawyers saying that, I became a lawyer because I like the whole idea of wearing my suit and walking into the court. And now I don't get to do it. Because most of the hearings that they are arguing is virtual. So they don't feel the excitement of being a lawyer. I don't know I think here it's not so much, because I think it's still physical. But in Singapore, most of the non-trial hearings are virtual nowadays. And so recently I had one where all the parties were in court and we were all so happy to be in court, seeing your friends. And it's also a time where, you hang out waiting for your turn to go to court, to go to the hearing, and you make friends while waiting, which sort of now doesn't really happen because everybody is doing it from their own offices. But in terms of efficiency, I think it's unparalleled. I mean, having virtual hearings helps with a lot of the scheduling problems. Even though in Singapore, we end up doing all the hearings at night. Yeah, because if you have US parties, you have European parties, the Singapore parties will end up doing the hearing 8 p.m. to 1 a.m. or something like that. Yeah, so those I think are the comparisons.
Thank you, Yuet.
Jayashree, can I
Yeah.
just add? There was one arbitration where we were sort of on the losing side of the arbitration. It wasn't going well for us, and we were stuck with a Section 16 interim application for interim measures. And the hearing, it was a physical hearing, and the hearing got over. And then the counsel for the other side, everybody started to leave, but the counsel for the other side stayed back and then whispered in the arbitrator's ear, sir, what about that other matter where you are also appearing as arbitrator? Have you taken a decision on that? And until that point, we didn't know because the arbitrator had not disclosed that he had been appointed by the same party. So it was such a win for us because eventually we got the arbitrator to, resign from his position. So to your point of how these dynamics work in person.
But it's worse if you're doing it virtually. What all gets revealed because you forget to, switch off your audio is terrible, But personally, I am a very hard copy person. Yet I like the virtual hearings,
I would add very quickly as well, it's not just the audio, but also the video. Seen some bad things on these hearings.
Thank you so much, everyone, for this. And I'm just going to quickly touch upon something which Rebecca said. Apart from ERA pledge and arbitral women, there is also green arbitration and a pledge of green arbitration. So everyone, please go back today and have a look at it. The carbon footprint about the voluminous compilations which we print out and share it with everyone, sharing an extra copy to every person who's appearing in the matter, just increases a lot of paper which is going in the process of arbitration. So please go have a look at it and see if that inspires you as well. Try and reduce your hard copy usage, and also we have this entire event getting live transcription if everyone can see it. So please use live transcription also. It makes everyone's life a lot easier. I'm moving to the last question of the morning. I'm just used to saying evening, so I was going to say evening. What would you tell, and this is to everyone in fact, what would you tell a person seeking their first appointment? Quick 1 or 2 pointers if you would like to mention to a person who's seeking their first appointment. And I'll start with Rebecca because she's sitting on the leftmost corner.
Probably just be patient, building on what we said earlier. And, as we discussed, there will be a number of times you're approached and you won't be able to take the nomination. So hang in there and just keep building your network.
Thanks, Rebecca. Manini?
I've already said everything, but I would say just start believing that you're an arbitrator. Like when you walk out of the room, just believe that you are, even if nobody else says it for a while, and just start thinking in those terms and talking to yourself as if you are an arbitrator. And then somehow I think it manifests over time.
Thanks, Manini. Justice Mittal?
Do both what Rebecca and Manini have said, and I'll add to that, pray hard.
Youthman?
I think what Manini said earlier about making yourself known, especially to the institutions, is very important. The other additional thing I would say is, and which is what I tell my younger lawyers who are interested, get help from your mentors, the older people that you know who are already in the circuit, because it's much less lonely to have to do it with some help. So if you go to a conference, you go to a networking session, just attach yourself to somebody you know will be willing to help you, introduce you to people. It just makes it that much easier to move around, because otherwise it's quite lonely to do it on your own, and you may feel, oh, I'm so young and everybody there is so senior. So try and find somebody who will be willing to help you, and then just attach yourself to the person. Because I always tell people, if I see young people, just come with me, I'll introduce you to some people. You get to make a few new contacts on that day. That would have made it worthwhile. And slowly, be patient. Slowly, I think you'll get there. I think that's important.
Thanks. Thank you, Youthman. Now I'm just quickly opening the floor for question and answers. Sonali has a question. I see her raising her hand very nicely, sitting in front. Could you just pass on the mic to Sonali, please?
Good morning. So I just wanted to ask a question to the panel. Well, I think given that the push for diversity has been fairly recent, the natural expectation is that women arbitrators would follow the lead of their male counterparts in terms of conduct, behavior. I heard the panel talk about women being more assertive, more aggressive. So the theme is really that there's a bar, and you've got to catch up. But my question is that, do you think that there are some skills, or including soft skills, that women are better equipped or are better to bring to the table, to add value to the table, which actually, their male counterparts are not that great at? So my question is to the panel, that where do you think women can add more value to the arbitral process?
First of all, let's not restrict it when we talk of inclusion to women only, I use the word gender. The Constitution of India, unfortunately, doesn't use gender, it uses sex, So we need to go beyond women, when we're talking of inclusion. And even though there have been women arbitrators, but I don't think we have others from the other gender, any arbitrator. Very few lawyers even who are, So the second thing is multitasking. Women think wider, they can think more diverse, and they'll bring a lot of skills which the other genders may not.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to add on to this answer?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. And one of the things that I have seen that has really worked is patience, which is something that I really think you cannot outrun a woman on. Because I have had cases where the counsel has said something, maybe just subconsciously thinking it out loud, which has been, to doubt my credibility, but verbally doubt it and say, something. And I find that I'm able to, and I'm sure the others on the panel will agree, not immediately respond and keep it in for a while, process what has happened, and just be assertive in my orders as opposed to reacting on the spot. And I think that has something to do with just developing patience in our cultural contexts that we live in, with the family, with work, with all the multitasking that ma'am just mentioned. So I think that is a skill that you can really develop, and it really helps you as an arbitrator.
Thanks, Manini. Can I move to the next question? I'll just wrap it up in another... I'll just take it another one question or something, because I'll just take one last question from anyone.
Okay.
All right, Achal.
Can you hear me?
Oh. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So we can hear you.
Okay. My name is Sushil Shankar. I think I better come up front. We can't see me, these people. So you were talking about green arbitration and using less paper and things like that. So my question to you is, how much of this, because everywhere people only target these soft targets, like they talk about these name tallies and photocopying. People don't talk about things like traveling business class for attending conferences, traveling business class to attend arbitrations. And your carbon footprint over there is much higher than using a few pieces of paper extra, So how much of this is hypocrisy? How much of it is green arbitration? How much of it is virtue signaling? That's my question for you.
I'm happy to take that. I don't think that it's hypocrisy or that there's tension between saying we should fly less for arbitrations and we should fly less for conferences. I think we all need to be really selective and really strategic about when it's actually essential. And my own personal practice is if you do need to travel to a conference, then that had better not be the only reason you're traveling, actually. And you try and make it as productive as you can. You fit in meetings, you do what you need to do. So should there be more guidance offered around that? I think it is fair to say that from the perspective of the Green Pledge, what we have really focused on is trying to improve environmental practice of arbitrations. I think in a way the sort of ancillary practices of arbitration practitioners, the same principles can and should apply. And just print less, fly less. Those two rules would make a huge
but
difference.
people only talk about print less. Nobody talks about fly less. That's my
No,
point.
flying less is an absolutely huge part, actually, of the Green Pledge principles, and I think just the general push in the industry to reduce the carbon footprint. And I would actually say fly less is our biggest focus. Print less follows that, and I agree it's important, but it's not the only focus.
Thank you so much, everyone. We had a vote of thanks, but we're running out of time, so we're just closing it right now. Everyone knows that I'm absolutely elated and thankful to everyone, especially the panelists, for coming here, taking out time early in the morning, including the attendees. Thank you so much, everyone. And if not anyone else, at least me on this stage, sharing the stage with everyone, has learned a lot, at least to get my future first arbitration. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.